My name is Jared Flynn, and 3 days before my wife's family reunion, she told me not to come. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the sunlight streamed through our living room windows in lazy golden slants as Talia folded towels on the couch. She moved with methodical calm, stacking the white squares into perfect rectangles as if anything out of place in our world could be smoothed over with another crease. I sat across from her, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching her shift weight from one foot to the other in a rhythm I'd memorized years ago. I sensed no malice in her tone when she said, "It's just for immediate family this time," but her words landed like stones against my chest. My heart had tightened the moment she blinked and looked away, but I forced a smile. "Sure," I said, sounding steadier than I felt. "Whatever you need." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust the woman I married, the one who still traced the freckle near my collarbone with her thumb when I drifted off in bed. I reminded myself that families change their minds, that invitations get updated, and that one weekend apart wasn't a sign of something darker. When I asked if she needed anything from the store, she shook her head without looking up and said, "Just relax. Have a night to yourself." I set my mug on the coffee table and leaned back, watching as she carried laundry into the bedroom. That's when the first seed of doubt took root. I replayed her words in my mind, tinkering with the emphasis, immediate family. Why the qualifier? Why now? But I told myself it was probably nothing. She had her reasons. The next morning, I filled my hours with errands. I washed the car, browsed the bookstore for a new mystery novel, and stopped by the cafe where the barista knew my order by heart. Each mundane task felt like an attempt to keep my mind busy, to stave off the uneasy hum of suspicion that grew louder with every passing minute. I pictured Talia surrounded by her relatives, hugging her cousins, exchanging stories about childhood vacations, and I smiled. In my head, I rewrote her reason for excluding me. Maybe her grandmother had health issues and needed a smaller gathering. Maybe her sister's new fiancé was in town, and they wanted to surprise him. I repeated these justifications like a mantra, desperate for reassurance. By evening, I convinced myself that I was overthinking, that my trust in her was strong enough to hold, and that nothing could shatter the bond we built. Then came the photos. I wasn't scrolling aimlessly when I stumbled upon them. I was trying to find a recipe for dinner on a family blog when my phone buzzed with alerts from social media. Talia's sister Raina had posted an album titled Haley Family Reunion 2025, and curiosity led me in. The first few images showed her mother Deidre greeting guests at the front door of her parents' home, flowers in hand and a proud smile on her face. I recognized my father-in-law's vintage record player in the corner of the room and the faded wallpaper that matched the living room drapes in our own apartment. Then I scrolled, and everything shifted. There she was, Talia, her hair pinned back in soft curls, wearing the sapphire dress she'd bought for our anniversary last year. Her posture was relaxed, one elbow casually resting on Marcus Hale's broad shoulder. His head tipped back as he laughed at something she whispered, and I caught a fleeting glimpse of the shirt he wore underneath his blazer, a faded charcoal tee with a graphic I recognized because I'd folded it into my laundry basket only weeks ago. My throat went dry. I tapped the picture to enlarge it, my thumb trembling. The next image showed them clinking champagne flutes, her eyes bright with amusement and an expression on his face that suggested he'd slipped into an intimacy reserved for lovers, not exes. My stomach lurched. Heat flooded my cheeks until I was certain someone on the bus home could see every drop of blood coursing through my veins. I scrolled further, and the album became a gallery of betrayal. There was a shot of her hugging her cousin Raina, and behind them, Marcus passed a tray of hors d'oeuvres to her father, as though he'd been invited by blood. In another, Talia leaned against his chest as he wrapped an arm around her waist, an embrace so natural that it looked like they belonged together. I froze on that frame, my pulse hammering in my ears, every logical thought drowned by a tidal wave of disbelief. How long had this gone on? How many tutorials I'd watched with her while he sneaked onto her phone? How many Sunday morning walks I'd taken alone while she met him in that cabin upstate? The questions piled up, suffocating in their weight. I set the phone down and pressed my palms into my eyes. The world tilted. My coffee table, the stack of mail waiting to be opened, even the light streaming through the window seemed to warp around me. I realized then that trust, once broken, doesn't simply snap back into place. It fractures, sending shards of doubt ricocheting endlessly. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but all sound fled from my throat. My wedding vows echoed in my mind, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health. I had kept my promise, even when sorrow came in small doses, late nights at the office, long hours away on business trips, the time she cried over a long-buried memory. But this was different. When I finally lifted my head, the reunion photos still glowed on the phone screen, mocking me with their laughter and their clinking glasses. I didn't know what I would say to Talia when she walked in the door. I didn't know if I could salvage the life we'd built, brick by jagged brick, over 5 years of shared mornings and whispered confessions. What I knew was that I saw her ex standing beside her, wearing my shirt, and I felt the ground slip away beneath my feet. I trusted her once, and now, staring at those images, I wasn't sure I could trust anything again. The reunion had come and gone without me, but in that moment, I realized that I had already lost something far bigger than a weekend gathering. I had lost the version of us I thought was real. When I opened the photo album that Sunday evening and saw that toast for the first time, my blood turned to ice. The image itself was deceptively ordinary, a family gathering, glasses lifted in midair, but the faces were the ones I never imagined seeing together. Talia's arm looped around Marcus Hale's waist, her fingers resting lightly on the small of his back as though they had rehearsed that gesture 1,000 times. He reciprocated with a half lean, holding his champagne flute just beneath the rim of her glass, so that the glassware nearly touched at the top. The caption beneath read, "Here's to old times and real ones," posted by her sister Raina with 9 little hearts following the exclamation point. My phone trembled in my hand as I stared, willing the pixels to blur into something innocuous, but they refused. Each detail was too clear, the way Talia's lips curved into a wide, unabashed smile, the genuine warmth in Marcus's eyes as he looked at her, the way everyone else clustered around them, as if this toast was the centerpiece of the entire reunion. I sat on the edge of our bed, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting long shadows on the walls. My mind replayed that day's earlier conversation. Talia's dismissal of me as if I were some distant acquaintance. She had folded towels with the same mechanical precision she used in her speech, hiding her real thoughts like secrets behind a veil of domesticity. I remembered her pitch-perfect tone, immediate family only. Her words had felt harmless, a small change. Now they rang with cruelty. She had made her choice clear. I was not real to them, not real to her family, and apparently not real to her anymore. Anger surged first, a white-hot flame that seared through my chest and made my vision darken around the edges. How dare she post that with a public caption, as if the world needed to see the monument to my exclusion? As if I hadn't been married to her for 5 years, sharing everything from morning coffees to midnight confessions? I thought of our wedding vows, the laughter and tears of joy as we promised fidelity, until death do us part. Did those mean nothing now? The thought of her laughter at Marcus's joke, the sound echoing from the recording on my phone, was more painful than any sharp word she could have uttered. Yet when the initial fury threatened to erupt, I surprised myself by stifling it. I didn't want her to have the satisfaction of seeing my rage. I wanted her to witness a different weapon, my silence. My thumb hovered over her name in my contacts. A simple click could connect me to her voice, hear her excuses spill out. But I couldn't risk dialing. Not yet. She needed to feel the emptiness, the fracture I would carve between us. So I did the only thing I could think of that would speak louder than anger. I documented. I tapped the share button and sent the image to myself via email, timestamped, and saved in a folder titled Reunion Proof. Then I took screenshots of every reaction. Her mother's smiling face with a glass halfway to her lips, her cousin Vic's awkward thumbs up as if he had no idea why he was even there, her Aunt Ginny's approving nod. I saved the comments too. Deidre's, "So glad you two found each other again," and Raina's, "Love is love." Sparkling heart. As I compiled evidence, my heart hammered, not with rage this time, but with a cold determination I barely recognized in myself. This wouldn't be a confrontation fueled by emotion. It would be strategic, precise, and irrevocable. Late that night, after the house had fallen silent, I sat at my desk and drafted a message I would never send, a manifesto of my betrayal. You told me it was family only. That man? That's family. I paused before hitting send, imagining her reading those words at 3 in the morning, psychic needles pricking her conscience. Instead, I deleted the draft and saved only the screenshot folder. I needed to keep my hands clean, my mind focused. Rage could poison judgment, evidence could not. In the days that followed, I observed Talia's behavior through the prism of that toast. I noticed how she held her phone now, how quickly she hid it whenever I entered the room. I watched her dialogue with her mother, the gentle cadences of their voices slipping to hushed tones when I drew near. I saw the way she hovered over the same sapphire dress she wore in the photos, brushing lint from the fabric and smoothing its folds as though trying to erase its memory. Once, I caught her staring at our wedding portrait, the one where we stood in the garden beneath the arch of roses. She touched the glass softly with a finger, as if trying to feel the warmth of our vows through the cold surface. Then she turned away, as if she'd realized I was watching. On the night before I made my move, I prepared a simple dinner, the kind we used to share in quiet appreciation: pasta tossed with garlic, chili flakes, and oil, sprinkled with Parmesan. I set 2 plates on the table, lit a single candle in the center, and poured 2 glasses of wine. My hand shook slightly as I lifted one glass, imagining that she might still join me. Then I set it down and walked away, leaving the meal untouched. I wanted her to see the evidence of normalcy I once offered, an unspoken question of whether she would accept it. When she found the scattered napkins and the single glass of half-poured wine, she didn't comment. She merely nodded, as if accustomed to my gestures being ignored now. Finally, I acted. Early the next morning, I sent her only one screenshot, the toast she thought I'd never see. I accompanied it with a hotel reservation, Ocean View Suite, 2 nights, no return ticket. No words, only dates and a location. In that image, she would see my escape route and understand it was carved from the same betrayal that separated her and Marcus. I turned off my phone, leaving it silent on the counter, and packed a single bag. I chose clothes that reflected who I was becoming: simple, unadorned, resolute. I left behind the bracelet she gave me, the photographs of happier times, and the crumbs of hope that had sustained me. I walked out the door with nothing but proof in my pockets and certainty in my heart that the truth would outlast any apology she might contrive. As I closed the door, I carried with me the memory of that toast, the extended arms, the clinking glass, the bright smiles that once symbolized unity but now stood as monuments to exclusion. I did not look back. I walked toward liberation shaped by betrayal, a life rebuilt from the shards of a promise broken in public view. And in that silence, louder than any argument, my departure spoke volumes. I never believed a single message could carry the weight of a declaration until the day I sent her that hotel reservation. I'd spent the dawn hours in our bedroom's soft half-light, assembling the details with meticulous care. On my laptop screen glowed the confirmation: Ocean View Suite, check-in May 17th, no fixed checkout. I clicked through the fine print until every clause matched my intention: escape, distance, and a refusal to return automatically. Then I packaged it with one solitary screenshot of her and Marcus, arm in arm at the reunion, frozen in that moment of laughter she thought private. I crafted the subject line carefully: there's room here. Just not for betrayal. No flourish. No question mark. No plea. Just a statement that would land in her inbox with the quiet finality of a locked door. By the time I hit send, the sun had climbed, pale and hesitant, through the sheer curtains. I powered down my phone entirely and placed it face down on the nightstand. My thumb hovered over the power button until I felt the device go dark. I wanted no chime, no vibration, no hint that my life had shifted into another realm. In that silence, I arranged my thoughts like cards on a table, each fact laid bare. The photos, the texts, the hotel confirmation. Everything conspired to tell her the same story: I was gone, and it was her choice to watch me leave. I packed methodically: undershirts, socks, jeans, everything in neutral tones, nothing that carried the scent of our shared past. I folded each item with care, as though each crease were a farewell, each placed shirt a testament to the chapters of my life she'd closed. I left behind the souvenirs of 1,000 small moments: the cufflinks she bought me before our first business trip, the framed ticket stubs from that indie band concert she surprised me with, the mug that read, "World's Best Husband." I carefully pulled those from the shelf, ran my fingers over the glossy surfaces one last time, and returned them to the cabinet. It wasn't anger that guided my hands, it was resolve. I was choosing clarity over confusion, self-respect over desperation, calm over chaos. When the bag was ready, I stepped into the hallway and looked back at our bedroom door, the sliver of shadow that marked the threshold between past and future. I pressed my palm against the white paint, feeling its cool firmness beneath my fingers. "Goodbye," I whispered, though there was no one to hear me but the empty hallway. Then I walked down the stairs, each step echoing with purpose, until I reached the front door. I unlocked it with deliberate precision and slipped outside, the early morning air filling my lungs with salt from the nearby bay. A brisk breeze tugged at my shirt collar, as though nature itself acknowledged the change. I didn't look back. I walked to my car parked on the street, keys in hand, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life with a reassuring rumble, and I backed out of the driveway without hesitation. Instead of heading to the airport, I drove along familiar roads, past the local coffee shop, the elementary school where we once walked hand in hand, the grocery store aisles where we debated thyme versus rosemary. I saw them all, every landmark a monument to a life that had lost its axis. I let tears burn behind my eyes but kept my jaw set. I fought the urge to call her, to hear her voice begging me to stay, because I didn't want to give her another chance to manipulate my hope. I wanted to leave behind the promise of reconciliation, so there could be no retreat. When I parked at the hotel entrance, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The valet greeted me with a polite nod, and I handed him the keys without a word. In the lobby, the receptionist recognized me from the reservation and immediately began printing the key card. I signed without looking up, feeling the click of pen on paper as though it were a final seal. Room 807, she said, sliding the card across the counter. Ocean View Suite. Enjoy your stay. Her eyes were polite, but I sensed no judgment, only business. And that suited me fine. I took the card and strode toward the elevator, the plush carpet muffling each step as I prepared to cross a threshold of my own choosing. On the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. My face looked stranger than I remembered. Eyes a little too hollow, cheeks faintly gaunt, but with a spark of something new, determination, maybe, or the flicker of self-preservation. I exhaled slowly, watching the breath fog the surface of the doors, and reminded myself that I was not running away out of fear, but moving forward with intention. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, I stepped out and found room 807 at the end of the corridor. I inserted the card, heard the lock click, and pushed the door open. Inside, the suite stretched out before me in muted elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, a king-sized bed draped in crisp white linens, a seating area where plush chairs faced the water, and a small dining table set for two and used, untouched. I walked to the window and pulled the curtains aside, letting the morning light flood the room. The view was breathtaking, a swath of deep blue interrupted only by the glint of sunlight dancing on the waves. I inhaled, feeling the salt in the breeze, and let a slow, steady quiet fill my lungs. Then I turned to the reservation confirmation pinned on the table and stared at the dates, May 17th to open-ended. It felt like a promise to myself that I would not look back, that I would not let her define the boundaries of my life. I tipped the chair back and sank into it, legs propped on the edge of the seat. My phone remained off, tucked away in my bag. For the first time in days, I felt unmoored from the pain, free to decide what came next. I thought about the small acts of betrayal I had once ignored, the whispered phone calls late at night, the abrupt cancellations of weekend plans, the folded towels that now seemed like a prelude to this moment. I realized that each one had carved away at my trust, leaving a hollow that only this decisive act could fill. Now, here in this silent suite, I felt the shape of my future take form, uncertain, perhaps, but undeniably mine. I poured a glass of water and let the chill settle in my throat. I thought of Talia navigating our empty apartment that morning, finding her phone dark and my suitcase gone. I imagined the confusion in her eyes, the scramble for explanations, the questions she might never find answers to. And I felt no remorse. Remorse would have meant I still cared enough to be hurt. But I cared, yes, enough to carve out my own space, enough to demand respect through absence, enough to show her that silence can be louder than any tirade. I placed the glass on the side table and closed my eyes, letting the rhythm of the waves below lull the exhaustion from my muscles. The betrayal sting would fade, leaving only the lessons learned, that trust must be earned every day, that honesty is the bedrock of intimacy, and that a man whose reality shatters has every right to rebuild on his own terms. I lay back on the bed, letting the cool sheets envelop me, and realized I had never slept better. Because tonight, I would dream of freedom, not of betrayal. And come morning, I would wake up as the man I chose to become, unbowed, unbroken, and finally free. She returned 2 days later as though nothing had happened. I was in the kitchen, spooning oatmeal into a bowl, the steam rising in soft spirals that mingled with the late morning light. I heard her heels click against the hardwood floor in the hallway, that familiar sound that once sent a thrill of anticipation through me. I watched her step into view, her shoulders settling, the casual toss of her hair. She kicked off her shoes, laid her coat on the banquette, and unzipped her bag. "Hey, honey," she said, voice light, as if the weekend had been perfectly ordinary. She glanced at me, eyes curious. What's for breakfast? My heart stuttered, that old ache of wanting to believe everything was normal, that I could pretend I'd never seen the photos. I set the spoon on the counter, wiped my hands on a dishcloth. I took a breath, steadying myself against the impulse to demand answers. Instead, I let the silence stretch, letting her get comfortable in the illusion that the house was the same as she'd left it. She leaned against the island, reaching for her coffee mug, and I watched the moment her gaze fell to my phone lying face up on the counter. It gleamed in the morning light, the subject line visible. There's room here, just not for betrayal. Her hand froze in midair, fingertips brushing the rim of the cup. I saw the calculation flicker behind her eyes. No shame, no immediate confession, just a careful assessment of damage control. She cleared her throat. That reservation. I saw it. Her tone was clipped, practiced. I was going to explain. I nodded, barely, and held her gaze. You said it wasn't what it looked like, she said, softening, reaching toward me. I swear, Jared, we can fix this. Her voice dropped to a whisper, the desperation thinly veiled under that same calm certainty she'd worn when she told me to stay away. I felt a surge of old love flicker, a memory of her laughter in the car when we first met, bright and unguarded. But I let the memory fade into the silence between us. I didn't ask her questions. I didn't demand details. I simply looked at her, eyes steady. You told me it was family only, I said, voice quiet but firm. That man, that's family. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation but free of anger. I wanted her to see them clearly, to feel the weight of every syllable. She swallowed, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant call of a passing car. She took a half step forward, offering a small apology that taste of regret without substance. I thought you'd understand, she said, voice low. We were just catching up. He's been through a lot. You know how close they were. I felt the old arguments lining up in my mind, the ones I'd accepted before, giving her the benefit of the doubt. Friendship, history, shared trauma. But this wasn't about excuses. It was about boundaries shattered. You didn't ask, I said, almost respectfully. You just excluded me. My own voice surprised me with its calm severity. She inhaled, shoulders hunching, the news settling in her bones. Finally, she spoke, words stumbling over themselves. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought it would be easier, she paused, gaze dropping to the floor. I didn't think you'd find out. I watched as the realization crossed her face. I had found out. I had seen the photos, cataloged every about her betrayal. I had prepared my exit while she wallowed in denial. I felt the final cord snap beneath both of us. I stepped around the island and placed my hands on the counter, leaning forward, making sure she saw the collection of printed emails and hotel confirmation tucked neatly at the edge. Easier for who? I asked, voice gentle but unyielding. You think it hurt me less to scroll through pictures and see you laughing with your ex? Tears pooled in her eyes, but I resisted the urge to comfort her. This was not a moment for comfort. It was a moment of reckoning. She took a breath and began her rehearsed defense, but I cut her off. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. Save it. The word felt final, each letter a brick I laid between us. She closed her mouth, lips quivering, and I saw the first true flicker of remorse, raw and unguarded. But remorse alone could not rebuild trust. Not after months of half-truths, clandestine visits, and staged family gatherings that never included me. I let her stand there, soaking in her own reflection of guilt, until she no longer held my gaze. Then I turned away, moving deliberately across the kitchen to the cabinet where I had boxed up her things, the silk scarves, the blouse she loved, the watch she clasped on her wrist every morning. I retrieved the heavy cardboard box, set it on the counter, and met her eyes again. Everything you left behind, I said, everything you brought me, it's all here. My voice was steady, almost soft. Take it, if you want it back. Or leave it. I opened the box so she could see the contents, but I did not step closer. I would not offer comfort or reconciliation. Talia exhaled, tears trickling down her cheeks as she surveyed the box. Memories packed away like an exhibit. She opened her mouth, choked, then closed it. Her hand hovered, unsure, over the items she once had cherished. The silence stretched, tense and brittle, until she finally whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Not why was I leaving, But why was I cutting ties so ruthlessly? It was as if she still believed I would coddle her apology. I folded my arms, leaning back against the counter. Because I trusted you, I said, voice low. And you broke that trust. Not just once, but again and again. You couldn't just tell me the truth. You had to hide behind immediate family and photo ops and public declarations. I paused, letting the words sink in. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not the guy who sits at home while you pretend you never build a life with me. My gaze was unwavering. This is where I draw the line. She stepped forward, voice trembling. I love you, she said, the confession raw and jagged. In any other circumstance, I might have reached for her, tried to salvage the broken pieces. But not now. Love without transparency is a hollow echo. I shook my head slowly. Love isn't enough, I said, soft but firm. Truth is what matters. I turned and walked past her, leaving the box and the reservation confirmation on the counter. I crossed the living room into the hallway and picked up my bag, the one I had packed days earlier. I slung it over my shoulder, feeling the straps bite into my skin. When I passed her, she reached out, fingertip grazing my arm. I didn't flinch, but I didn't reciprocate. I kept walking. At the front door, I paused, hand on the doorknob. I glanced back at her standing in the kitchen doorway, tears running unchecked, vulnerability laid bare. My heart thudded at the sight, but my resolve held. I gave her one last look, not of anger, not of pity, but of clear-eyed acceptance that this chapter had ended. I opened the door and stepped outside, closing it gently behind me. As I walked down the path, I heard her soft cry echo through the glass. I didn't look back. I carried with me the knowledge that I had drawn my boundary, honored my worth, and refused to remain in a story where I was nothing more than a placeholder. The door clicked shut, and with it, I left behind the man she once left behind. The first time I noticed something was off, I was sorting through our shared cloud storage, looking for that photo of us at the beach last summer, the one where Talia caught me laughing mid-splash. Instead, I stumbled onto a folder labeled Memories, created under her maiden name. My heart thudded as I clicked in. There were images I didn't recognize, candids of Talia and Marcus, side by side at her mother's birthday party 2 years ago, their heads tilted toward each other as if they were sharing a private joke. I froze, cursor hovering over the thumbnails, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. How had I missed these? How had she slipped them into an account I never knew existed? I dove deeper, heart pounding in my chest like a warning drum. Beneath the Memories folder lay subfolders titled with dates: August 14, 2019, November 2, 2020, May 23, 2021. Each one contained more evidence of a life she'd never shared with me. In August 2019, Talia and Marcus stood in front of a cake at Deidre's kitchen island. Their laughter caught mid-air, frosting smeared on her cheek. In November 2020, they leaned against the grill at Silas's barbecue, Marcus handing her a plate piled high with ribs, the sun setting behind them in an amber glow. In May 2021, they held hands on the deck of her father's lake house, faces bright with the sort of comfort and ease I had never felt in our own home. I scrolled until my thumb ached, each image a stab of betrayal, each memory a testament to her carefully hidden past. It wasn't enough just to see the photos. I needed context. I needed words to match the images. So I searched my email for any correspondence between them, messages accidentally CC'd or forwarded. There, buried beneath receipts for groceries and flight confirmations, I found a forwarded chain from late 2019. Marcus had sent Talia a link to a local pottery workshop. Talia had replied with a note that sounded innocent enough. This looks fun. Want to try it? But then Marcus's next email, marked private, read, I wish you were here every time we went. It's not the same without you. That single sentence burned in my mind like a brand. Not the same without you. He didn't mean our mutual friends or the cake bakers he'd known since childhood. He meant her. I sat back in my chair, head spinning, as I realized how many times I'd trusted her explanations. We're just catching up. We've been friends forever. He needed someone to talk to. Every defense now sounded empty, thin as a house of cards ready to collapse. I opened my chat history with her in our messaging app, dozens of deleted conversations, archived archives I'd never thought to check. Among them, a video file labeled Cabin Night. My pulse quickened as I tapped it. The screen lit up with shaky footage, Talia and Marcus sitting on the wooden porch of her dad's cabin, the lighthouse lamp inside flickering behind them. They held mugs of hot cocoa, steam rising in the chill night air. and they laughed as if they were the only two people in the world. At one point, Marcus brushed a loose strand of hair from her forehead, and Talia leaned into his touch the way someone might lean into a long-lost embrace. Then he whispered something I couldn't quite make out, but her smile afterward told me everything I needed to know. I paused the video, heart hammering against my ribs. The cabin. That cabin she'd told me last summer was too small, a cramped space that didn't have room for company. I believed her. I had imagined she meant it in a practical way, that her father's place simply couldn't accommodate an extra guest. Now I saw that the cabin had been the stage for their reunion, for rekindled intimacy she'd made sure I never witnessed. I pressed my fist against the desk, knuckles whitening, and closed the laptop, as if shutting the lid could shut out the truth. But the truth was everywhere, in the clay fingerprints on her pottery wool project that smelled faintly of the workshop she'd claimed to attend with friends, in the ticket stub she'd tucked into her bag, a stub for a hiking trail he loved. One they'd hiked together while I was away on a business trip. I found the stub crumpled in the pocket of her jacket, pressed there as a hidden souvenir. I found a map in the glove compartment of my car, marked with the exact coordinates of that hiking trail, and a note in her handwriting. Meet me here at sunrise. It hit me then that I had not been blind. I had been willfully trusting, clinging to the version of her I'd known. I had believed in her love because it was easier than facing these fragments of betrayal. But now the evidence was undeniable. Marcus had never really left. He slipped back into her life at every milestone. Her mother's celebrations, her brother's gatherings, her father's retreats, always under the benign guise of friendship. And I had been the last to know, the last to be told the chapters of her past that shaped her present. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed photos, screenshots, ticket stubs, and booking confirmations. I spread them out in a neat grid, like a detective laying out clues in a murder case. This betrayal was murder of trust, and I was both victim and investigator. My friend Eli's words echoed in my mind. Don't give her a story to tell. Give her a mirror to look into. I had compiled every shard of evidence so that when the time came, she could see herself as I had. Through the lens of truth, unfiltered and raw. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of traffic outside as I pieced together the timeline. Her exclusion of me from that reunion wasn't a one-time lapse. It was the culmination of years of hidden rendezvous and unspoken promises. Every birthday, every barbecue, every cabin stay had been an opportunity for them to rewrite a history I was never part of. Their stolen moments had been piled up like secret letters in a locked drawer, until now. With the layout complete, I photographed the arrangement with my phone, saved the image in the reunion-proof folder alongside the original toast. I deleted the rest of the cloud folders, archived them, but kept backups on my hard drive. I knew that someday this evidence might find its way into a courtroom, or at least a lawyer's hands. But more importantly, I wanted it to serve as a reminder to myself that truth, once uncovered, cannot be buried again. Before bed, I stood by the window of our bedroom, looking out at the city lights, and felt a steady calm wash over me. The man I had been trusting, forgiving, hopeful, was gone. In his place stood someone who had faced betrayal and refused to be broken by it. I stroked the condensation on the glass, watching my reflection blur against the night skyline, and vowed that from this day forward, I would only share my life with those worthy of seeing every part of it, both light and shadow. If Talia wanted to reclaim a place in my future, she would have to own her past completely. But for now, I closed my eyes and let sleep claim me, knowing that the truth I'd uncovered would guide me through whatever came next. I remember the first time my phone buzzed that afternoon, an unfamiliar number lighting up the screen. I was in the car, parked outside the neighborhood park where I'd taken to walking, trying to clear my mind of clouded thoughts and fragmented memories. The sky was a soft, overcast gray, and the air held the promise of rain, the scent of wet pavement curling around me like an omen. I hesitated before unlocking the screen. Usually, I ignored unknown callers. But something in the way the number glowed, a cold precision, like a blade, made me swipe. "Hey, man," Marcus's voice came through, low and awkward, as if he weren't sure who he was speaking to. It rattled me more than I expected. "It's Marcus Hale." A beat of silence followed, punctuated only by distant birdsong and muted traffic. I shifted in my seat, heart pounding. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I felt the vinyl press into my palms as I waited. I didn't mean for things to go down that way," he continued. "I thought you knew." His words hung in the air, laced with a helplessness that echoed in my gut like a hammer blow. He thought I knew. The implication twisted my stomach into knots of betrayal and rage. All this time, years, maybe months. He and Talia had conspired behind my back, and now he expected me to accept it as though it were some cruel misunderstanding. I gripped the wheel tighter, portraits of their hidden rendezvous flashing through my mind. The cabin by the lake, her mother's kitchen island, the barbecue where he placed that plate of ribs in her hand. His voice grew silent, waiting for a response. You thought I knew? I echoed, tone controlled but brittle. I stared at the steering wheel for an answer, unwilling to meet his gaze through a screen I had no television for. Look, Jared, he said, clearing his throat. I never wanted to hurt you. You know that. Talia and I, we didn't know how to tell you. He sounded contrite, but I smelled the lie as surely as I'd smelled the damp grass of the park. We didn't know how you'd react. Marcus's words were slick with self-justification. I realized then that he still thought he owed me something, an explanation, perhaps an apology. But apologies after the fact felt thin, like trying to patch a leaky boat with a bandage. I took a breath and leaned back, rolling my shoulders to loosen the tension. You didn't know, I said, voice steady but cold. You didn't know? You didn't think to ask me if I minded? You didn't think to tell me you'd be standing next to her in matching shirts I thought were exclusive to me? My words came faster now, heated by the evidence I'd gathered, by the betrayal that had seeped into every corner of my life. Marcus's voice cracked. It wasn't like that, he protested. Talia and I, we've been friends forever. She needed someone to talk to when her dad got sick. I was there. I'm family to her. I felt the familiar ache of betrayal twist into disgust. Family. He called himself family. He invited himself back into the fold, all while I sat at home, blind to the machinations of two people who'd erased me from their own story. I could feel my jaw clench. I thought of the countless times I'd supported Talia through crises, late-night hospital visits, missed birthdays, frantic texts at dawn, only to learn that she'd hidden equal crises with him. I thought of the hotel reservation I'd sent her, the room waiting by the sea, an open-ended promise she chose not to keep. I thought of every unspoken word between us and felt the cold certainty of one truth. I would not be treated like an afterthought. Family, I said quietly, letting the word hang. If you're family to her, why hide it? Why create secret accounts and private messages and photo albums? Why make me look like the fool who believed in marriage vows while the two of you played house behind my back? My voice wavered as I asked the question I didn't need answered. I already knew. Silence fell. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the engine and the distant trill of a cicada hidden in the brush. Then Marcus sighed, the sound of a man admitting defeat. I'm sorry, he said, but his words felt like emptiness. I thought I was helping her. She was broken after everything with me. His confession rang hollow, the echo of an old wound he'd inflicted on her long before she inflicted a newer one on me. I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. I pictured Talia's face in that reunion photo, eyes alight with laughter, lips curved in a smile that had nothing to do with me. I pictured her slipping away at night to meet him, the quiet click of the cabin door closing behind her, the low murmur of whispered conversations and shared secrets. And I realized their plan had been this whole time, to rebuild their love quietly, to tell me only when they thought I could handle it, if ever. I opened my eyes and stared at the dashboard. The park lay before me, empty swings swaying in the breeze, benches waiting for strangers. I thought of how I had once imagined building a home with Talia, a place filled with laughter, trust, and promises. Now it felt like a stranger's concept, a blueprint for a life that no longer belonged to me. My grip on the wheel relaxed. I no longer felt the need to shake the car into submission. I had all the proof I needed. Thank you for letting me know, I said finally, voice calm. Your honesty is appreciated, in a way. I imagined the weight of those words landing on him like a stone. But it's too late for apologies. I kept the tone measured, void of malice, even as my heart thudded with a mix of sorrow and resolve. I've already made my decision. He hesitated. Jared, please. I heard the catch in his voice, as though he wanted to beg. But I wouldn't let him. This wasn't about forgiveness or empathy. It was about the finality of my choice. I've documented everything, I said, knowing how those words would land. Photos, messages, videos. My lawyer has copies. If you reach out to her again, there will be consequences. The threat was neither idle nor cruel. It was the logical end to months of deception. I had crossed every T and dotted every I. Silence stretched on his end once more. Then he hung up. The line went dead with a click that resonated in my ear. I stared at the phone for a long moment before turning it off and tucking it into the glove compartment. I couldn't bear its weight in my pocket, its power to summon the ghosts of betrayal at any moment. I sat in the car a while longer, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, the distant laughter of children echoing from the playground. I thought of Talia, waiting for Marcus's next message, believing they could fix this without me ever knowing. I felt both pity and contempt for her naivete. But more than anything, I felt a sense of liberation. The final pieces of evidence had fallen into place, and I stood unburdened by illusions. When I finally walked away from the car, I felt lighter, as though I had shed a second skin. The message Marcus sent, the one he shouldn't have, had done more than confirm my suspicions. It had released me from the bonds of denial. I had seen the full tapestry of their deceit, and in that clarity I found strength. I would not be defined by their betrayal, but by the way I chose to rise above it. That afternoon marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I walked away from the park with steady steps, the world around me alive and indifferent, traffic humming, birds calling, life moving on. And I, Jared Flynn, walked forward into a future I would now build on truth alone. I discovered the account one rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky hangs low and the clouds threaten to break at any moment. I was in our home office, sorting through my expenses for the month, balancing receipts against bank statements. Talia's coat hung on the back of my chair, her wool trench, dark gray with a lining of satin. I reached for it absent-mindedly to take to the dry cleaner when a slip of paper fell from the pocket. I smoothed it out on the desk and saw my name, scrawled in her familiar handwriting, Ocean Trail RV Park /12/14. My stomach lurched. She told me she'd spent the weekend with her college friends at a writer's retreat in Sonoma. When I checked my calendar, I realized I'd mentioned that trip, and we'd laughed about how I hated camping. That's why she'd left me out, to avoid convincing me otherwise. I dug out my laptop and opened her email account, one she rarely used, under her maiden name, curiosity pounding in my ears. The inbox was sparse, mainly newsletters and the odd receipt. But in the sent folder, a series of messages caught my eye, 2 to 3 small withdrawals labeled Spa Bliss and Serenity Retreat. Then another one addressed to MH with a subject line reading Weekend Plans. My hand shook as I clicked it open. Inside, she had booked a weekend at a lakeside spa under the name of her grandmother, an account I didn't know existed. I scrolled down to find the address, the very spa Marcus's company had sponsored last year when he'd hosted a corporate retreat. My heart pounded. I knew I was on the precipice of something I didn't want to find, but I had to see it through. I opened the confirmation email, a small screenshot showing the reservation, Serenity Springs Spa, April 18th to 20th. Deluxe Couples Suite. Deluxe Couples Suite. Not the single-person room she'd claimed she'd booked. I swallowed hard, vision blurring with unshed tears, and scrolled further. Attached to the email was a note in her handwriting. Can't wait to be with you again. Underneath, a line I didn't need to read twice. Love, T. I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair, mind reeling. She hadn't just kept my exclusion from her family reunion a secret, she'd kept an entire parallel life hidden. Everything was the same excuse, the same scripted phrase, girls get away, just friends catching up, family emergency. Yet here she was, planning romantic weekends far from home, sharing a room designed for couples, sending love notes meant only for him. I pressed my palms to my face, as though I could block out the evidence by sheer force of will. But the truth was as real as the slick of rain on the window pane. I opened a new tab and typed in Serenity Springs Spa. The website loaded with soothing images of waterfalls and stone lanterns, with pages of therapy descriptions and couples packages. I clicked on the Suite Options link and found the Deluxe Couples Suite, complete with a private steam room, a 2-person massage table, and a canopy bed. The price per night was staggering, well beyond what I'd ever seen on her credit card statements. How had she managed these expenses without my noticing? I took a breath and closed the browser. My phone buzzed with a message from Eli, checking in as promised. How are you holding up? It read. I stared at the screen and knew I needed to keep the momentum of evidence gathering. I replied back with one word, discovery. Then I forwarded the screen capture of her spa reservation and the note, can't wait to be with you again. I typed under it, this is what she considered a girl's trip. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. I needed every ally I had to see this clearly. That night, I sat in front of the fireplace, the flicker of the flames dancing against the walls, while rain battered the windows. I laid out every piece of evidence on the coffee table, printed emails, screenshots on my phone, the crinkled reservation receipt from her coat pocket. Each item represented a betrayal, a fracture in the foundation of our marriage. I traced my finger along the lines of the confirmation email, reading her words again, love, T, as if they were carved in stone. In that moment, anger flared hotter than the fire in the hearth. Not because she'd planned a secret getaway, but because she believed the secrecy was her birthright, that she could hide as much as she wanted, and I'd remain oblivious. The next morning, I called the spa directly, using a discreet caller ID. A polite woman answered, Serenity Springs Spa. How can I help you? I asked about a reservation under my wife's maiden name for a deluxe suite, dates April 18th to 20th. The receptionist placed me on hold, and I heard a soft instrumental melody playing in the background. When she returned, her voice was gentle. Yes, sir, that stay was confirmed. Room 402, deluxe couple suite, 2 nights. We received initial payment and hold on a credit card ending in 2235. My jaw clenched as I matched the card ending to one I rarely brought with me, the one she used for her secret excursions. I thanked her and ended the call, feeling the thud of betrayal in my chest. All day, I replayed the call in my mind, hearing the polite tone of the receptionist as she confirmed what I already knew. She had booked a weekend for 2 at a couples-only spa. I realized then that every negotiation in my mind about giving her space, trusting her explanations, had been hollow concessions. I had given her the benefit of the doubt too many times, and she had repaid that trust with deception. I could feel my sense of self shifting, growing into something stronger, someone who realized that concealment was as damaging as outright betrayal. That evening, I walked to her favorite cafe, where she often took her laptop to work on her articles. I ordered my usual black coffee and sat at the corner table, imagining her there, oblivious to the storm I carried inside me. I watched baristas steam milk and pour lattes, couples laughing at adjacent tables, the hum of life around me providing a stark contrast to the turmoil in my chest. I knew I needed one more thing before I could make a final decision, her reaction, unfiltered, to the evidence I had uncovered. Back home, I laid out the printed emails and the spa brochure on our dining table, placing the note, "Can't wait to be with you again," front and center. I left her a single message on the kitchen chalkboard. We need to talk. No time, no place, just the 4 words that would draw her in. I stepped back, heart pounding, as I imagined her face when she saw them. Would she panic? Lash out? Beg for understanding? I didn't know, but I would find out soon enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the darkened bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain patter against the roof. Every drop sounded like the ticking of a clock counting down to her arrival. I thought of the message she had presumably left for Marcus, love, T, and felt the weight of an unspoken vow hanging in the air. I realized that the consequences of her actions would define her as much as mine would define me. In the faint glow of the bedside lamp, I wrote in my journal. She thought I'd never find her secret account. Now she must face the reflection of every choice she made. I closed the book and slid out of bed, moving silently to the door. I paused, taking one last breath of the cool, humid air before leaving the sanctuary of the bedroom. I knew that tomorrow I would show her the evidence and watch the truth unfold in her eyes. As I crawled back under the covers, the rain finally ceased, leaving only the hush of early morning. I closed my eyes, mind alive with anticipation and dread, and understood that beyond betrayal lay the opportunity to redefine my life. I drifted into sleep, knowing that by dawn, the secret she thought I'd never find would be the catalyst for our final reckoning. I arrived at Deidre's house on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day when the air holds a lazy warmth and the cicadas hum like distant memories. I pulled into the driveway, heart a steady drum beneath my shirt, and stepped out of the car carrying only my phone and the weight of everything I had uncovered. The front door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of the bright floral wallpaper visible through the gap. I waited for the doorbell to drift toward me in the warm breeze before I nudged it open and walked inside. The entryway smelled of vanilla-scented candles and fresh linens, a comforting fragrance I had once associated with family gatherings and laughter. Today, it felt like an ambush. I paused at the door, where a small table held framed photographs of birthday cakes and holiday dinners. Images that now felt staged, masks hiding the truth. I let the door swing shut behind me and took a deep breath to steady my nerves. I could hear faint voices in the kitchen, Deidre's and Raina's, and the polite clink of forks against plates. I stepped forward and called out, voice low but firm. "Deidre? Raina? Are you here?" My tone carried an undercurrent of purpose that made the voices halt mid-sentence. I held up my phone, the screen aglow with the video I had saved, the one of Marcus and Talia on the porch of the lake house. "I need you to see something," I said, voice calm. They appeared in the doorway moments later. Deidre's warm smile faltered when she saw the look in my eyes. Raina blinked, her fork poised in midair, and her lips parted as though she were about to speak. I stepped into the kitchen, phone held high. The room felt too small for what I was about to do, but that intimacy suited me. I hit play. The video filled the screen, Marcus brushing a stray lock of hair from Talia's face, her smile bright in the lamplight, the sound of their laughter low and private. The moment their lips nearly met, the crackle of the video's audio caught in the hush of the kitchen. Deidre's hand flew to her mouth, Raina's fork clattered onto her plate. I let the video run until it ended, until the final frame of their intertwined hands lingered on the screen. Then I tapped pause and set the phone on the counter, face up, as though it had become the centerpiece of a courtroom exhibit. Silence pressed in around us, dense as fog. Deidre looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. "Jared," she began, voice quivering. I raised a hand to stop her. "Let me finish," I said. My voice was measured, lacking anger but heavy with betrayal. "This is what you let happen under your roof, under your watch." I glanced at Raina, whose cheeks had gone pale. "You knew him as a guest, best friend, maybe. But you also knew him as someone who shouldn't have taken my wife's place in the family." Deidre's lips trembled as she glanced at her daughter, then back at me. "We thought," she began, but the words died. She couldn't finish the excuse, not in the face of this evidence. Raina's shoulders slumped. She looked 10 years older, guilt pooling in her expression like spilled ink. I walked past them and approached the dining table, where I'd laid out printouts of photos from the reunion album, Talia and Marcus side by side, their arms around each other, glasses raised as though to toast my exclusion. I flipped one page to reveal the image of their laughter at the summer barbecue, then another to the birthday party candidates. Each group photo bore the names and dates beneath, proof that I had documented every moment they'd shared. Deidre's gaze flicked from one photo to the next, tears brimming in her eyes. Raina pressed her lips together, eyes downcast. "Every milestone you shared with him, you let her hide from me," I said, voice low. "Birthdays, barbecues, family vacations, moments you all thought I would never see. You allowed them to build a narrative that erased me." I paused, letting it settle. "Why didn't any of you ask me if I minded? Why did you let this continue?" My question hung in the air like a challenge. Deidre's tears broke free, trailing down her cheeks. "We didn't know how to stop it," she whispered. "We thought it was harmless, that they were just reconnecting as old friends." Her words came too late. Raina stepped forward, her voice cracking. "We were wrong," she said. "We never meant for it to hurt you. We thought you would understand when you knew the whole story." I shook my head slowly. Understanding doesn't come from secrets. It comes from honesty. I gathered the photos into a neat stack. I have the receipts, the messages, the videos. I've shown you just a fraction of what I found. I met Deidre's eyes, then Raina's. "You had a responsibility as her family to protect our marriage, not undermine it." The anger in my tone surprised even me, an anger born of protective instinct, not malice. Deidre stood and approached me, trembling. "I'm so sorry, Jared," she choked out, voice thick. "I never should have. I should have told you." She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. "Sorry isn't enough." My words felt brittle, precise. "It's too little, too late." I swept past her and headed for the door, pausing only to pick up my phone. I scrolled through my evidence folder and deleted the video from my camera roll. No need to keep it here. They had seen it. Now the proof existed only in my possession. In the doorway, I turned back to face them. Deidre's shoulders shook with sobs. Raina's face was a mask of shame. "I'm done asking for answers," I said. "I'm done waiting for your loyalty. I've made my choice." I squared my shoulders. "I'm moving on." The words felt both frightening and liberating as they left my mouth. I stepped outside, letting the door swing shut behind me. Once on the porch, I inhaled deeply, the humid air thick with the scent of magnolia blossoms. I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes, but also a steady resolve. Inside, the family I once called my own reeled from the revelation. Outside, I stood free. I climbed into my car without looking back and drove away, leaving behind the home where they had allowed deception to flourish. As I pulled onto the street, I realized that true family is built on honesty, not convenience, and I would find mine elsewhere, among those who valued truth above all else. I arrived home under a slate gray sky, raindrops pattering against the car's windshield like the tapping of impatient fingers. The apartment was silent when I unlocked the door, the only sound my own footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. On the kitchen table sat a crisp white envelope beside a neat stack of papers, divorce forms I'd downloaded days earlier and printed out, ready for signatures. My heart thumped as I crossed the room, each step a testament to the resolve I'd fought so hard to build. I lifted the envelope, noting the familiar curve of Talia's handwriting on the front. Inside, folded once and tucked beneath the flap, lay a single photograph. Marcus standing with his arm around her at the lake house, twilight painting the water silver behind them. I let the photo slip from my fingers onto the table, face up, the image distorted by the tear I hadn't realized I'd shed. Beneath it, I saw my own note, scrawled in bold, deliberate strokes. You replaced me before I ever left. Now it's official. The words cut through me like glass, sharp and irreversible. I gathered the divorce papers in my hands, the weight of each page confirming the truth I'd known for weeks. I ran a finger down the first sheet, a prenuptial agreement, child custody waiver, asset division, all laid out with clinical precision. I thought of the life we'd built, fragment by fragment, and realized how quickly foundations crumble when trust is removed. The pen I picked up felt heavy, as though it carried all the betrayal and heartbreak of our entire marriage. A silence settled over me, a brief, precious moment of calm before the final act. I placed the pen's tip to the line marked signature and felt the beating of my pulse in my fingertips. My handwriting, once neat and confident, now trembled slightly as I signed my name. I exhaled, a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding. The sound echoed in the empty apartment. I stood and slid the papers back into their envelope, sealed it with deliberate care, and tucked the photo inside. I gathered the envelope, my phone, and the pen, and walked to the front door. The rain had slackened to a gentle drizzle, and the world outside glistened like polished steel. I paused, hand on the doorknob, and glanced back at the empty apartment, at the life that would soon be just memory. Then I stepped into the evening, closing the door behind me without hesitation. In that moment of quiet departure, I felt the finality settle in my bones, and with it, a curious flicker of freedom. My phone buzzed with her name flickering on the screen, a string of calls, texts, and voicemails weaving together into one last attempt at reconciliation. I sat on the edge of the bed in my new apartment, bare walls, fresh paint, the faint scent of hope, watching the attempts stack up. Each ring owned felt like a ripple in a pond I had chosen to leave behind. I let them play out without lifting a finger, determined that silence would do the talking now. Morning light filtered through the blinds as I finally unlocked the first message, a voice note that trembled with apology. Talia's soft voice wavered. Jared, please listen. It was a moment of weakness. I love you. You're the one I really want. I'll do anything to make this right. I closed my eyes against the memory of her laughter and photos. The warmth she once brought to my life turned cold by betrayal. I didn't respond. Next came her email, subject line pleading. Our marriage deserves one more chance. Inside, she outlined plans to seek counseling, to be transparent, to rebuild trust with daily updates and shared calendars. I scrolled past, pausing at each promise, tasting each word like poison. None of it could erase the months of secret meetings, hidden accounts, stolen moments. I deleted the email without hesitation. By midday, her mother had reached out, voice heavy with regret. I should have told you, Deidre sobbed over the phone. We were wrong. You didn't deserve this. I told her thank you for finally acknowledging the truth, and hung up. No more conversations about what-ifs or near misses. I was finished with excuses, finished with the fantasy of what might have been. That afternoon, I walked through the Riverside Park where I once imagined a future with Talia. Picnics on the grass, shared blankets under the willow tree. Now I walked alone, the breeze lifting my collar, carrying away remnants of old dreams. I felt the lightness of solitude, unburdened by deception. I breathed in the clean air and exhaled the last vestiges of hurt. Later, I placed a final letter in the mailbox addressed to her. A brief note stating that our marriage was officially over and that I wished her well. No bitterness, no rancor, just clarity. As I dropped it into the slot, I felt the latch close on that chapter of my life. Walking home, I realized that truth had spoken when I refused to remain silent. The echoes of betrayal faded behind me, replaced by the steady sound of my own footsteps and the promise of an honest tomorrow.